Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm the Grand Chief for the Southern Chiefs Organization, Jerry Daniels. I'm here with Chief Hudson and Chief Travers, and we're speaking about the jurisdictional dispute between the federal and provincial government on flood preparation, flood mitigation, and the consequences of the inaction of our treaty partners in ensuring the protection of our infrastructure, of the livelihoods of our families. And so we're here to make clear our disagreement with that and the responsibility of the government, their officials, and their bureaucrats in ensuring that our people have proper protection when it comes to flooding in our communities. Chief?
Yeah. I just wanted to give thanks for being here. And, this issue surrounding flooding at Peguis First Nation has to come to an end in terms of our people being impacted by high waters. Our original reserve was located in the Selkirk area, the former St. Peter's Reserve, and we were forced into the location we are today. And without inadequate infrastructure, this continues to impact us as a people. And we're the original owners of this land. And that's something that governments, both levels of government, must come together and address these issues. We didn't ask to be in this location. We were forced by government to be in this location. And that's something that brings on trauma, brings on emotions, brings on very negative effects in terms of not only the community, but individuals, our people, our families, our elders. And that's something we need to address, because when you look at the colonial policies of this country, they've had nothing but negative impacts on our people. And that's something that we need to change, and we need to work together. When we signed treaty, it was to work together in peace and harmony. And this flooding, the 11th time in the last 20 years, Peguis First Nation has been impacted. And also, this being the largest flood and most impactful, we have to address these issues. Chief.
Good morning. Thank you for being here, Chief Hudson, Chief Daniels. I concur and agree with the chiefs here that we are greatly impacted by the waters, flood waters, most recently. And our area, I speak on behalf of Kanozawistigon, Jackhead. We travel through Peguis many times on a daily basis, and we experienced a lot of damage to our vehicles. It impacts our lives. We spend millions of dollars on insurance for our people from our vehicles, our banned vehicles. For years and years, we've requested help from the province to upgrade 224, and to this date, it's always the same. Just patch up, band-aid jobs. That's all they ever do. Nothing serious to fix up our roads. With that, I agree with Chief Hudson. I'll do whatever possible to make this happen, to fix our roads properly in the years to come.
Yes, the Road 224 is a provincial road that is through our community. And not only does it impact Peguis, but it impacts our surrounding First Nation communities. And I know Kenojay, their people had to evacuate because the provincial road was breached in many locations. So we call on the provincial government, to fix the road network through our community. It doesn't meet standard today. And also when it comes down to the waterways, there was drainage funded by the provincial government south of us. And now today this drainage results in flash flooding in our community. And this type of approach and systematic racism, I guess, it has to stop in terms of the funding. We deserve drainage too. We deserve proper funding, and we deserve proper roadways just like any other Manitoban and Canadian. And something, we need to address, because we're the first peoples of this country, and we deserve what is rightfully in place in terms of other Canadians and other Manitobans. And that's something that we're going to continue to lobby and work with government on in moving forward. And that's something that I just want to call on both down and find solutions. We do have those solutions with us, but we need our partners at the table to be able to correct things.
We're living in a time that we have characterized as reconciliation. When you see the municipal governments or municipal partners sort of being offered the ability to provide themselves with flood protection and also to provide preparation for spring flooding, and that same funding not being extended to our First Nations communities, that's blatant racism. Racism within the institution. It's discriminatory. It's a reflection of how governments have not changed, and that the behavior and ideology continues to exist even today. The province did not prepare, and the federal government did not help prepare our communities for what had transpired, and you just have to look at the funding that was made available. It wasn't made available for Peguis First Nation. It wasn't made available for our communities, and that's a true reflection, I think, that all Manitobans and Canadians need to understand when they're thinking about what exactly transpired here. Non-Indigenous people were given the funding to prepare. Indigenous people were not given that funding. And we're always at the margins of society when it comes to preparing and being in a position to protect ourselves. It's already bad enough that our life expectancy is 11 years. There's a differential of 11 years. Now we have to deal with housing crisis again when we're already having housing crisis in our communities. So it's just, and the costs that Manitobans and the federal and Canadians have is now increased because of not the lack of protection. The mitigation efforts would have created a better financial investment, and now there's going to be a great deal of liability. And I think that people around the country and around the province need to be holding themselves accountable and also speaking and ensuring that that ideology that we just spoke of changes. And that's what we're here to tell you. That Peguis is owed a lot here. Our citizens shouldn't be staying in hotel rooms here in Winnipeg, and should be given an opportunity to start to protect ourselves going forward for many, many generations, and not simple band-aid solutions. And that's what we need to see in a country that wants to talk about reconciliation.
Yes, the history of this country in terms of our treatment of our people has been very negative. And today, we have to change that history. Mother Nature gave us a historic flood, and those things have to change in terms of moving forward. We want to reconcile, we want to move forward as communities, and we want to make progress just like any other non-First Nation community here in Manitoba. And we have the ability to do that, but we need the support of both levels of government to help us in terms of this long-term flood strategy and long-term flood mitigation. So with that, I want to give thanks for being here and give thanks for Grand Chief Daniels and Chief Travers for being here. And we certainly call out again on the federal government, provincial government, let's sit down, find solutions for First Nations people, which rightfully should be in place like every other Canadian, every other Manitoban. Miigwech. Yep.
We're now going to open it up for questions. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free.
So
We can do hands up. Yep, great. Go
we
ahead.
saw this week a group of Peguis residents threatening all the governments to put them on court. Do you plan to threaten them to put them on court too?
Well, definitely. The trauma that people face, when you look at residential schools, our people were forcibly taken from their home. And when they have to forcibly be removed as a result of flooding, that trauma is reoccurring. And that shouldn't be happening. This is a first world country. And, that history cannot be repeated. It needs to change. And that's what we're doing. We're going to go to court in terms of our people and supporting them, because we don't want to put them through that anymore. Enough's enough.
So just to be sure, you're now supporting this group of residents that was protesting.
Class action lawsuit.
a class action lawsuit for our people.
Thank you. Sheila, you had a question next.
So the grassroots people were talking about filing a class action lawsuit. Is that the one that's the one you're talking about? Are
Yes,
you
yes, we
joining
are.
together with
Yep.
that? Okay. Do you have any cost estimates yet on the damages?
Well, in terms of the damages itself, I would say we're on the order of $200 million in terms of the infrastructure, our critical infrastructure, our housing. And I know we are carrying out the recovery right now and determining, the damage. And once we complete that, we'll know the exact total. But right now, we're in the upwards of probably $200 million.
And is that over the years or just this flood alone?
Well, it's reoccurring, as I indicated. We had 11 floods in the last 20 years, and this one being the most damaging and the most, problems with respect to our critical infrastructure. It's reoccurring, but now this one had set the precedent, and there's a lot more damage than we've ever had.
Now, feds in the province, every time we ask them for accountability, they tell us they've given you this much money or that much money, and that they're working with you and everything seems to be going smoothly. What's the issue there? Have you talked to them, and what led you to this point where you're calling them out, both of them right now?
Well, in the past, they have given us $4 million. $4 million doesn't come close to $200 million in terms of the critical infrastructure and housing. And that's something that we need to sit down and address. Again, we're willing to work with them, but when you're nickel and dimed in terms of these repairs and the replacement costs, they haven't even come close to the amount that's needed in terms of repairing and fixing our community and ensuring long-term flood mitigation is in place. I guess in terms of the floods themselves, we had 11 over the last 20 years. We've worked with them, and they've spent on the order of $70 million, $80 million on the response. Rather than sending money on response, let's send money in terms of mitigation and emergency. Again, they probably spent another 30, 40 million just on the emergency side. Let's put that money to new capital and rid of the problems as far as long-term flood mitigation.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you just give us an idea of how many homes have been damaged in this year's flood?
This year, there's on the order of 700 plus homes that would be impacted. And I know 200 were completely surrounded by water.
In the press release, there's a distinction made between people who've been evacuated and referring to them maybe as refugees. Can you just kind of provide some context there?
Well, when you look at our lands, our homelands, they're not livable. They're not safe. It's not healthy environment in terms of where we reside. It's like the Ukrainians. It's not safe for them right now. So they're coming over, and they're basically refugees in this country. We're refugees in our own country, and we're treated like we're third world citizens here. This is a first world country, and this is our homeland and our partners as far as the federal government and provincial government. We must be treated differently.
What's the latest response from both the feds and the province for this?
Well, they have reached out, and they've stated that they do want to sit together. But the fact of the matter is there hasn't been any concrete meetings put in place. And we will be reaching out to them to make sure that there is follow-up.
And if not, is there already a motion to get the class action?
Yeah, there is 2 lawsuits that we are pursuing. One is a class action for the people of Peguis, and the other is by the First Nation for our critical infrastructure to make sure long-term flood mitigation is in place. Again, they've spent money, dribs and drabs, but it's nowhere near the commitment we need on the order of $200 million.
And we don't hear enough about what the province's responsibility is, I think. Sometimes we hear a lot about the fed's responsibility, but how much is the province responsible for?
Well, the province has a responsibility for the provincial highways through throughout Manitoba, and we do have 3 provincial roadways that go through Peguis and that are also connected to provide safe passage for other First Nation communities and non-First Nation communities. So we need to have that repaired and brought up to standard. And also the water network. The province assumes control of the waterways in this province, and we have a waterway that we have flash flooding as a result of them funding drainage. And that funding stopped at the south of our reserve boundary. Why did not follow through and improve the drainage throughout our reserve? It didn't. And unfortunately, that's where we are today, and they have a responsibility.
Chief Travers, you mentioned about paying MPI. Your people pay MPI, but you're saying you don't get the proper roads that you need for
Well,
travel.
since I began driving when I was a teenager, I've always paid insurance for vehicles, the driver's licenses, and our communities are forever growing. Peguis, Fish River, Dallas area, and of course there's Peguis, big population in there as well. And you know what, our population is forever getting bigger every year. And our teenagers are growing up, they have vehicles, licenses, and we have to pay insurance. They have to pay insurance in the millions of dollars. And what do we get back? Bumpy old road. We've been requesting repairs for that road for many years. When my brother was chief, Bill Travers, you know, back then we requested numerous meetings with the governments to improve the road, to rebuild it. You know, nothing. And here we have a federal government and a provincial government sending billions of dollars in a matter of time to Ukraine. And here we have a terrible road. And you know, it's costing us millions of dollars for insurance or banned fleet vehicles, our own personal vehicles, you know, creating damage to our vehicles, repairs. And that's where I stand right now. Thank you.
We'll take one more question, and then the chiefs will depart. Any other questions? Okay, thank you all very much for coming. We really appreciate it. Any final words, chiefs?
Well, our First Nations people in this country deserve the best treatment. You know, we opened up this land for settlement of settlers that have come over many decades, and we still continue to allow that. But we do it as a result of wanting to work in partnership together. So we call on both the federal and provincial government, let's follow through with those commitments, and let's not have First Nations be refugees in our own country. We need to correct things and have proper infrastructure in place so we can eliminate the problems like that in our First Nation communities. We invest money outside of our reserves to Manitobans, to Winnipeggers, to Canadians to help with the developments of this country, and we want to make progress. And that's something that we will continue to do, because that's who we are as First Nations people in terms of working together. But we call on government to sit with us and let's arrive at solutions.
Do you have a deadline for that?
Well, the deadline that we're looking at in terms of starting the discussions is immediate, but in terms of having long-term flood protection, I would say, you know, over the next 2 years, we have solutions and we can arrive at those solutions, but we need that financial commitment as far as jurisdiction goes in terms of the roads, the waterways, and also the critical infrastructure.
And if they don't commit to what you're asking for,
Well, I guess we'll move into Winnipeg and take our land back. That's something that we are looking to do. And again, we want to prosper just like everybody else.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Big witch.